Hello and welcome back to Wise Money School. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics when it comes to money. This topic is near and dear to my heart for so many reasons. And we're going to break down today money from a different perspective. In fact, I'm going to tell you why you don't want to win the lottery. But really what this theme of today's conversation about is kids and money. But not just kids and money, but your kids and money. And so this video is for any of you parents out there or soon to be parents, or I want to be a parent, because this kids and money thing is really important. And I'm even going to share with you some statistics I think that will definitely prove why having this conversation is a subject that we need to even bring to our dinner table. So generational wealth and legacy. If you followed me for a while, you know that I started in a trailer home, kind of really that rags to riches story, and maybe rags to riches to rags to riches to rags to finally just riches. But starting that trailer home, growing up, my parents, we didn't have money in the household. There was always fights about money. Big knockdown dragouts, screaming matches, things might be flying across the room. So money was this really scary subject, and we didn't have any. So I was made fun of at school, and I was called names, and High Water Krisstina was one that stuck around for a long time because my pants were always a little bit too short after I outgrew them. So I think many of us can relate to this money trauma that maybe we had as kids. And what happens is when we don't clear that trauma as parents and we don't work on our own money story and learn about money, what's naturally going to happen is we're going to pass down our money stories, our money beliefs, where we're stuck with money, our narratives with money. It's just going to go from our parents to us, down to our children, to their children, and so on. So as parents, if we've grown up in any type of environment where money was a topic that was really scary, lots of arguing, or it just wasn't talked about at all, and we want to change that, we want to offer our kids a different experience with money, then the buck stops here, meaning we need to make changes and then choose to pass that along. And that's what I call generational wealth. But again, generational wealth, the way to think about that is our thoughts, behaviors, beliefs, and mindsets around money, personally, and then consciously how we want to pass this along to our children. So it's being very conscious around this thing called money and kids, and money and family, and money and mindset in family, so on and so forth. So did you know that over 90% of all generational wealth is gone by the grandkids? 90%. So imagine that you've done a really good job being a great steward of money, building wealth, you pass it on to your children, and then let's say it's millions and it's totally gone by the grandkids and there's nothing more to pass on. So that's what's happening 90% of the time. And this conversation really goes twofold. Is one, we're all after money, but again, I think so much of our own money desires in a way is that we desire money for our own lifestyle and for our kids in a way, but we're not thinking about money beyond that. And so the reason why this is such an important topic to me is because of where I started. And I like to say that I'm an example of how fast you can change the trajectory of the wealth. Because my family didn't have anything. My dad died without anything to pass on. And he was on his deathbed really feeling guilt and shame about not being able to pass anything on to his children. But now, just within my generation, my kids will receive an inheritance and their kids will receive one because I'm making sure to be able to pass that along. It's something very important to me. But the example of that is in just really one generation, me choosing to learn money, me choosing to work on my mindset, me choosing to clear the money trauma, me showing up to things like this where you are to learn this money thing. That's all it took to be able to change that generational legacy. And I want that for you. I want that for everyone. But how do we do that? With generational wealth, again, it's the idea that we are able to pass something along. But it's even more than that, because my kids, like I said, they will receive an inheritance. But I mean, there's timelines attached to it. There's lots of conditions and restrictions. And it's in the trust and everything that they can only receive certain amount of annual amounts, and principal can never be touched. It's only the interest, and things can go to the grandchildren. So one thing, like I've built out this trust and I've built out this legacy with a lot of specificity to make sure that the grandkids can't blow all of the wealth that's left over. Like, it's going to be distributed very intentionally and pre-built. So obviously I thought about that and built that in, and that's part of how that wealth will pass on, hopefully for many generations if I designed it well. But that's the thing, that's the money. But more importantly than the money that my kids and grandkids might get, what I really want to pass on to them is the financial literacy, the knowledge, the know-how, is to be able to talk about money where they understand money. And here's the reason why. Have you ever heard, it's called sudden wealth syndrome? Sudden wealth syndrome. Yes, Google it. It is a thing, sudden wealth syndrome. So where I said at the beginning, I'm probably going to tell you why you don't want to win the lottery. But everyone's like, hey, I want to win the lottery. And my definition of the lottery is any big windfall of money. So it can be you actually win the lottery, and I don't know, it's a scratch off and you win $10 million or $100 million. It could be pro athletes. Pro athletes win the lottery, that they might go from growing up the way I grew up to all of a sudden they have multi-million-dollar contracts. And that's winning the lottery, the financial lottery. Winning the lottery, maybe you have this ambition, you're an entrepreneur and you're working hard and you're building this business and you're grinding and you're living off rice and beans for so many years, and all of a sudden you sell the company in a big windfall of money. And it can be like what we're talking about in inheritance, where you receive a lot of money. And I can't tell you now, over the number of years, the number of people that I've talked to, students and clients that I've worked with, that they are a testament to this, where they received six figures or even millions of dollars of inheritance, and then years later they had nothing less left. So that's what this sudden wealth syndrome is. This sudden wealth syndrome, this syndrome kind of coined by some therapists, where families were going to therapists because they were having all these issues because they got a bunch of money that they didn't know what to do with or how to work with it, and it caused anxiety. It caused them depression. What a lot of these windfalls caused, the syndromes caused a lot of guilt and shame, that I have a lot, but the rest of my family doesn't. It creates a ton of family issues because all of a sudden it's like, you won the lottery, you have all this money, and now all the siblings and cousins and second cousins are coming out of the woodwork and saying, hey, can I borrow some money? Or you have all this money, would you buy me this or do that? So it creates all types of jealousy and family issues. And it also creates something called imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome means like, hey, we received all this money, let's say in this case inheritance, but we feel like we don't deserve it. And that imposter syndrome is like, I didn't earn this. Like, I don't feel good about it. So all those things can cause these ripple effects that really causes people to wind up in a therapist's office. But worse than that, due to this, this sudden wealth syndrome, a large majority of everyone that receives, wins the lottery in one of these different types of situations, they lose it all within a few years. And then that causes that next iteration of symptoms from the sudden wealth syndrome of like, oh my God, I had all this money and now nothing's there. And that's the case with a lot of my students and clients I've worked with over the years. Is we really had to work with that. It's like they felt terrible because they had all this money and it ran out so fast. And now it's kind of like starting over, and a lot of regret and remorse and so on. So we have to be careful with this lottery thing, this lottery mentality. And for us, because we can fall victim to the statistics, but then also, but more importantly to our children, is that I had a lot of mess to clean up when it came to money. I had huge mindset issues I had to overcome. Like I said, I had tons of money trauma because of how I grew up. And then my goal or my desire as a parent was that my kids wouldn't have as much. I know I've made tons of mistakes in parenting and things, but they wouldn't have to overcome as much when it comes to money. And that's why I wanted to have dinner conversations around money and talk about money, and where money is something that they've learned. And I have my money school, and both my kids have gone through my money school, and my daughter teaches what I teach when it comes to money, and she teaches a lot of young adults because both my kids are in their 20s, but they're teaching this now as far as this money mindset and how to be good stewards of your money, and that you have to spend less than you make, and so on and so forth. Everything that I teach in this YouTube channel, my kids actually practice and teach. So even though, yes, there's generational wealth and I'm going to be passing real money along, what I really wanted to pass along, more importantly, is their knowledge, their literacy, their mindset, their narratives, their stories around money, so that even if they didn't get a dime, they know how to make it, keep it, and they can pass on their money if they want to, as part of this idea of generational wealth. But we have to want to create generational wealth and then put it into effect. But that's, again, so much of it is the literacy piece. But if we as parents don't understand money, we're scared of money, we don't talk about it, what do we think is going to happen with our children? And again, I like I said, I love this subject because I want it just to kind of pop up into our consciousness that, hey, I want my kids to have a different money story and a different money opportunity, and not necessarily adopt everything that I've been spouting out for any number of years. Okay. So that is sudden wealth syndrome. And that brings me to what I want to talk about today. And really this idea comes from, his name is Scott Donnell. And I don't know, I think I had like a 60, 90-minute conversation with Scott. I booked him on the Wellthy podcast. I think he's on like in November. But Scott Donnell, he has a book called Value Creation Kids. He has a podcast that's called Money Parenting, something about money and parenting, or parenting and money, that's a podcast. He has something called Dinner Table Conversations. But everything that he does is really to inspire families to have these money conversations. And I love that. And what he talked about, what I loved, is he really gave this distinction of inheritance versus heritage. And inheritance is this, is if we can, maybe we receive a bunch of inheritance, or in this case, we're talking about our children. So yeah, we can give our children an inheritance, but then they might fall into that lottery trap, that sudden wealth syndrome, which we don't want for our children, right? So he gave me the distinction, instead of thinking of inheritance, start thinking, creating heritage. And so I really love that, create a financial heritage around money and family. So we're thinking about money not just as a family when the kids are little, but the family as it grows. Again, thinking about 2 or 3 or more generations. And what is this heritage? And when we start thinking about that, there's a few things that need to happen. Like I've already said, that number one, we have to become financially literate. We need to understand money. We need to decide to take responsibility and be good stewards of money, and just learn the things and put our money to work and let it grow so that there is something to pass on. So 1, it starts with us. And then 2, it is looking at things like, hey, I just had a conversation yesterday with one of my students. Her name is Dina, and the Wise Money School. They just graduated, so I had a graduation call, and we talked about that. She said, Krisstina, in one of our classes, you talked about a will, and that it's a responsibility of a parent to have a will. And she said, I'm really kind of ashamed to admit it, but our daughter's 15 and we don't have a will. So if something happened to me, or if something happened to my husband and me at the same time, what would happen without a will? So, I coached her on the thing with the will, but so many families have children and don't have wills. And I just think I call it adulting as part of a parent. To be an adult parent, we need to make sure that we have a will, because if we don't, it's really messy for the children. So I could talk a whole thing on wills, but we'll leave it at that. But yeah, Dina was just saying, like, what do I need to do and how do I get started? But I wasn't even thinking about a will until you mentioned it. So that's just it. When we get our own things in order, and like I just said with number 1, but number 2, as parents, we want to make sure we have a will to begin with. From will, we may go to, creating a real estate plan and putting stuff into a trust. and to, make sure that the trust and the will and the estate plan with, like I said, complete specificity is all really planned out and put in writing, and to do that work. And it's not easy. It's kind of a pain in the ass to go to the attorney, to sit down, to think through, to get all your stuff together, to put it in, all these different places. But that's part of the responsibility of parents when it comes to money. So that's number 2. And number 3 is, how do we talk to our children about money? Do we have family get-togethers? Do we have conversations around money at the dinner table? And in the video where I really reference Wall Street Trapper, that when I listened to his podcast with Tom Bilyeu, I just loved him so much, because he said, like, my job as kind of the CEO of the family is to think about this generational wealth, and my job is to make sure that my children and grandchildren can talk about money and understand money and can make money and get what value is and know how to invest and know where the stocks are, know why we invest in certain stocks, and that they can say, I own that and I own that. And I just loved his passion around being kind of the patriarch of the family in a way financially, to make sure that he's passing along not just maybe generational wealth, but the generational knowledge of the wealth and the wealth creation and how they have family meetings and so on and so forth. So, and that's something that Scott Donnell says too, is that when it comes to heritage, that as a family, it's the conversations you have money about at the dinner table, but also what's the family values around money? Where is all of the money? What's the family mindset when it comes to money? How do we talk about it? What is value? What are you going to get or not going to get? What isn't in the will and the trust, and so on and so forth? He talks also about the importance of having family meetings. So these are the things that when we're thinking about generational wealth in our children and your kids and money, it's more than just, hey, an allowance, or more than just, how do I pay for college? It can go way beyond that. And I want us just to think beyond maybe just college for the kids. So, and it's even putting things in savings plans for weddings and first houses, and all these different ways we can help our children, especially today when it seems like times are, financially tougher than historically, because prices are high on housing and there's inflation and these different things. So we want to really think of this heritage part of our generational wealth. Like, how are they going to inherit the knowledge, not just the money? And same thing, like that our family is going to have annual meetings. I think I said it in the Wall Street Trapper video, that I teach my kids money. I've built all the things that I just talked to you about. But I never really thought about my job as maybe being the matriarch of the family, to be able to have these conversations and family meetings. And I don't have grandkids yet, Kellen Macy, wink, wink, hopefully sooner than later. But when, to be able to talk to them and talk to the grandchildren and to put these certain things in place. But I want to be thought of that way. And I'm going to start having annual family meetings, so the kids know where everything is and what's happening, and if anything needs to be updated, and talk to them how to talk to their kids, for example, when they have children. So that listening to that Wall Street Trapper video or interview or podcast with Tom Bilyeu, like I said, it was just really an eye-opener for me, and I loved it. And if you haven't watched that one, I think it's my best video yet, with a number of views. So it's got the most comments, the most views. So if you haven't seen it, I think you'll really love it. So make sure to check that out. So really, I guess to complete this whole stream of consciousness here is that there's this thing that I've referenced many times now called money trauma. And another thing that Scott Donnell said when I talked to him was that he said there is this such thing as money trauma. And now they have worked with thousands of families, and his organization has talked to thousands, if not tens of thousands of kids. And what he said is that the overwhelming majority of all the kids that they've talked to, and these are kids at all ages, but mostly probably middle school age and up, kind of middle school to high school age children, what they're saying is that they don't want anything to do with money, nothing to do with money, because money is the number one fight in the home. parents bickering over bills, parents divorced and trying to buy the love of the child by buying stuff from the other parent, or child support not happening in conversations, and so on and so forth. But we're traumatizing our children. So there's a generational wealth piece and heritage piece of, yes, maybe desiring to pass along the knowledge and pass along the financial literacy and pass along maybe some money. But maybe even more importantly than that is not passing along this money trauma that we maybe experienced as kids, but we're giving our kids by fighting about money in the household, where money just not being talked about at all, and all the stuff that's causing children to be scared of money. Because if they're scared of money and money's not safe, they're going to repeat the same things that we've done, and they're going to repeat what they've seen and heard, and they're going to acquire and adopt and be programmed by the words that we say, which are going to create your kids' limiting mindsets and their limiting beliefs and all sorts of things that's really going to wreak havoc over their money life. So bottom line, if we don't control our money really does control us. And if we're not great stewards of our money as a family, it can wreak havoc on family systems. So let's just look at a few stats to kind of just prove out the point as we close up here. So when we go back to that sudden wealth syndrome and the lottery win, that we think that, hey, I just need to win the lottery. Win the lottery will solve all my problems. And winning the lottery can be just making a lot of money. One of my lottery wins was when I was in my late 20s and I got into real estate. And here I'd never made more than probably, I don't know, $10,000 a year in college, or probably not even that. And I go from not making any money or having any money from being on, grants and loans and all the things in college to getting into real estate, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. All of a sudden I had all this money, and then that was a big lottery for me. It was a big lottery. What is a poor kid that grew up on the streets, when it comes in a bunch of money, what happens? She buys everything. So, and I did. I'd go and buy a BMW, and I bought this and I bought that. So that's the lottery win. There's all types of lottery wins, and I blew it all. And I ended up bankrupt and couldn't feed my kids. And that's another story for another day. But millions, we think, hey, if I had won a contract for, I don't know, $10 million, that would solve all my problems. But no, 78% of pro athletes are completely broke within 2 years when they retire. Within 2 years, 78% are totally broke, and most of them are bankrupt. Over 60% say they're completely out of money and they don't even know what to do next in their career if they can't play football, for example. I mean, these are real statistics. Same thing. Of those that win the lottery, I was going to say over $1 million, but I don't think there's really a number to it. But of all lottery winners that, the scratch off or the mega ball or whatever they call it, the lottery wins, 75% of lottery winners lose all of their money within 3 years of winning the lottery. Think about that. I mean, that's the hefty majority of everybody that receives these lottery wins. So what does that tell us? What do these statistics tell us? It tells us that there's more to this money game than just getting a bunch of money. And we don't want our kids to be part of these statistics. This is a good one. This one came from Scott Donnell also. And 76% of young adults don't know how to balance a checkbook. They barely know how to open up a new bank account or buy a car. And they just are completely financially illiterate. 76% of young adults can't pass a basic financial literacy test. I mean, these are staggering numbers. So why is this the case? I think it's because we as parents, we're not taking responsibility to educate our children. And it's not because we're being bad parents. It's just we don't even know that we should. We're not having these types of conversations, which again is why this conversation is so near and dear to my heart. 3 out of 4 high school grads and college grads, again, they have debt. So kids are coming out of 18, they've graduated from high school, they're in college, graduating out of college. They have debt right off the bat, credit card debt. So they're starting out their adulthood in debt, in the red, before they even know how to make income and to make full ends meet. 78% of us are paycheck to paycheck. And again, paycheck to paycheck just means that money in, money out, there's just enough money in to cover all the bills. And this is independent of income. But look at everything's around 78, 75, 76, 78. And 60% of millennials earning over $100,000 a year are paycheck to paycheck and making good six-figure income, but still barely able to make ends meet. A lot of them are still living with their parents and so on and so forth. And then finally, 60% of U.S. households can't cover a $1,000 emergency expense, one of those rainy day expenses, meaning, again, paycheck to paycheck. We just don't have any savings sitting there. And I think a lot of these numbers, like not having the savings, is because we're living this lottery win mentality. We just are waiting around to win the lottery without understanding the basic rules of money management, the basic principles of money and how money works. And we're just not taking the time to truly not just learn, but implement the money skills, I guess, that are required to be able to, one, not live paycheck to paycheck, two, to be able to start to build our own wealth and start to move towards our own financial independence as an individual or couples or a family. And then after that is, of course, to move on to that multiple generational wealth. So thank you. If you have children and any part of this talk was helpful or caused you to think differently, please put your thoughts down in the comments. And if you have kids, especially if you have young adult kids, I have this money personality quiz, and so I'll put that in the description, because some of us are savers and some of us are spenders. And so it's just really good to know what our own internal money personality is, so we know like what our natural inclinations are and what we can improve on. And then the final thing, I thought, if this talk really resonated with you, I have a whole money masterclass on marriage and money, and I'll put that in the description also. And I really just talk about parents getting on the same page with money, and how couples, how to talk about money, how to plan for money, how to have dinner conversations about money, how to have money dates. And then ultimately, when we're strong as a couple with money automatically, and we can talk about money in a healthy way amongst ourselves, and we can have, our family financial plans, and we know where we're going and what we're doing and how we're going to do it, and we're on the same page, that's naturally going to transfer to the kids. And then if we amp that up with pay, we have a whole desire to teach our kids this money thing even more intentionally than that, even better. But I'll put a link to that in the description below. That's all I've got. Wishing you well. As always, put those thumbs up or hit the subscribe button. By this time, you know the drill. All right. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time.